Okay, so we are starting a new unit on linear equations. And so the first thing we want to talk about is how we can find slope from a graph. And if you look at this graph here, there's a whole bunch of lines on here. They're all different colors, and they're all labeled with A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then you'll notice that there's two really kind of thinner gray lines. Those are the axes. So you have the X and the Y. Okay, so you have the X and the Y, and all these graphs that we're going to be working with are going to be on an X and Y axis like this. And so the thing we just have to be able to do is we have to be able to look at these graphs and be able to determine if the slope is positive, negative, zero, or undefined. And the way we do it is we always look from left to right. Okay, so we're going to go from left to right. And if a slope is positive, positive means it's going up, and negative means it's going down. Zero means it's going neither up or down. And then undefined is if the line is going straight up and down, because that's a slope that we can't calculate. Okay, so if we look at line A is the red line, and if we look from left to right, well, we could say if we go from left to right, we have to go up if we're going along that line. So that would be a positive slope. So I'm just going to use a plus sign for positive for line A. For line B, the orange one, from left to right, it's going down. So we'd say that has a negative slope. And then line C, the purple one, it's really, really steep, but from left to right, it is going up. So that has a positive slope. And then if we look at line D, one of the green ones, there's two green ones on here. D and G are both green, but we're looking at D. D is a horizontal line. So it's kind of like the floor in your house. It's not going up, it's not going down. So the slope is going to be 0 for line D. For line E, the black line, it's kind of like line C. It's going up. It's super steep. It's going up, so it's positive. And then if we look at line F, the blue one, from left to right, it's going down, so it's negative. And then line G, the other green one, is going straight up and down. And any line that's going straight up and down doesn't have a positive slope, doesn't have a negative slope, doesn't have a zero slope. It has what's called an undefined slope. So we'd say this is undefined. All right, so what I want you to do is take a few minutes and go through this next graph on the page and look at each one of the lines, identify if the slope is positive, negative, zero, or undefined. And remember that since they're in the red boxes, you're going to enter these answers into Schoology when you are done with it. All right, another thing we can do with a graph is we can get more specific about the slope. We can look at it and say it's positive, negative, zero, or undefined, but then we can also determine what the actual slope is. And if you look here, there's an equation right here that says slope equals rise over run. And this is a formula that we're going to use to find the slope of every single line that we're dealing with in this unit. So we're going to look at the rise, and we're going to put it into a fraction in the numerator, and then we're going to look at the run, and we're going to put that in the denominator. And when I say rise, rise means up or down, and run means to go to the right. Okay, so we're always going to think up or down and then to the right. Okay, so we don't want to think to the left. We're always going to think up, down, or to the right. Okay, so if I look at this first graph here, I'm going to make it bigger. The key thing is to draw a triangle. And I always want to go up or down first and then to the right. Okay, so if I'm going to go up or down first, I can pick any of these points. So I'm just going to pick the one that's furthest to the left, and I'm going to go up here, and then I'm going to go to the right here. All right, so I went up 2, and I went to the right 7. So my slope equals the rise over the run. And this rise in this case was 2, and the run was 7. So my slope is 2 over 7. Okay, which means if I go up 2, I'm going to go over 7. And I just continue to do that. Okay, so if I were to go up 4, I'd go over 14 because I've basically just doubled the two numbers, right? If I go up 6, I go over 21. So it's just the slope is a relationship, and the relationship is we rise 2, we run 7. Okay, so if we look at the next one, this one's a little bit different because we can look at it and identify that the slope is negative, it's going down. So if I start at the furthest point to the left, I have to go down first, and then I can, and then I can run, or I can move to the right. So in this case, I went down 8, so that's a negative 8, and my run is 3. So my slope is rise over run. In this case, it's negative 8 over 3. Okay, let's look at another one. So here we have a whole bunch of points, and it doesn't matter which pair of points I use. So I can pick any pair of points, and generally I always want to use points that are next to each other. I suppose I could go like this and skip a point. I could do that, but what you're going to end up with is a fraction that you have to reduce, because if we look at this one, we went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and over 2. So my slope in this case is rise over run. It's 6 over 2. But if I go to just a pair of points that are right next to each other and I don't skip any, and if I go up and then run over, I went 3 over 1. Okay, so my slope is 3 over 1, and these two slopes are actually the same thing, because if we think about it, 6 divided by 2 is 3, 2 divided by 2 is 1. So 3 over 1 is just 6 over 2 simplified. Okay, so what I would suggest when you're doing these slopes is always pick points that are right next to each other instead of picking points that where you have to skip one. Okay, we got 3 more here. All right, so this one has a super steep line, but it's negative, and I can draw my line here. I'm going down first, and then I'm going over. So I went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So down 5, so it's negative 5 over 1. And so my slope is negative 5 over 1. And you'll notice I'm always going to write these as fractions, even though there's just a 1 in the numerator. Well, technically the slope is just negative 5, but I'm always going to write the 1. Did I say numerator? I meant denominator. There's a 1 in the denominator, so I'm always going to keep it as a fraction, because we're going to use this slope in the future, and we want it to be in a fraction when we use it. Okay, here we go. Another one. Whole bunch of tiny little numbers, or tiny little dots. So let's make this one super big. So if I just pick any pair of dots, or I say dots, they're points actually. If I pick any pair of points and I just go up and I go over, remember I always want to go up or down first. So if I were to try and do one of these and go down first, I'd have to go to the left, and I don't want to go down and to the left. So we don't want to do that. So I'm going to cross that one off, because we always want to go to the right. And so in this case, I went up 1 over 1. So my slope is 1 over 1. And I'm going to leave it like that, even though I know 1 over 1 is just 1, because 1 divided by 1 is 1. Okay, and then here we have one that has very few points on it. There's only 3. And that's okay. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start furthest to the left. And then in this case, I have to go down 1. And then I went over a whole bunch. So I went down 1, so it's negative 1. And we're dealing with the negative side of the x-axis here, but you'll notice that every single time I did run, I always keep it positive. So in this case, it's 9. Even though we have negative numbers, you'll notice that the only number that's going to be negative will be the rise. So in this case, it's -1, and then the run is 9. So my slope in this case is -1 over 9. And there's a reason for that, because my slope, the rise is either up or down, and up is positive, down is negative. But the run, or the denominator in this case, the 9, is always to the right. So it's always going to be a positive number. All right, so you have 3 down here on the bottom that you need to do. And just like the other 7 from the previous page, you need to enter those in Schoology when you are done with them.